Absolutely. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so, so much for this beautiful Sabbath day so far. It's been so wonderful. We've had so many good conversations, Lord, and we've been able to fellowship in such a beautiful way that I think has helped and encouraged us all, which is what the Sabbath is for. And we thank you, Lord, so much. We ask that you continue to give us the understanding and the wisdom and the thoughts and remind us of the hope that we have, so that whenever we feel discouraged, Satan can't take our minds to a place where we feel like we can't keep going. Please continue to be with us, help us and strengthen us in our faith, and help us, Lord, to keep going and pushing past every obstacle that comes in our path, and help us to constantly be looking to the light that you've shined on us so that we cannot fall off the path. We thank you, Lord, so much for the message that we have, the beauty of the message that we get to behold, and the thing that we get to take as a message to everyone else, and to see their hearts overjoyed when they see how beautiful this message is as well. We ask that you please be with the people who had prayer requests and praises. Lord, there's so many family and friends and different people out there struggling with the difficulties of the situation in life right now, and we ask that you please be with them and help them. And we ask that you be also with the speaker in their next presentation. Help them to be able to present in a manner that they wanted to, that conveys the message in a clear way, and help us to be able to understand and learn something new. We thank you so much for the opportunities that we still have. And we pray all these things in the Lord Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Let me find the right file here. Hang on one second. There we go. Now you can see it, right?
Yes.
And like I said, this one follows the, I didn't do that. Here we go. This one follows what Brother Jim and Sister Sue Ellen did from Whitestone Foundation. This was study number 5 that followed right after the Vision of the Path. And she kind of touched on some of this as she was working her way towards the lines of the revolutions. So I got a couple things I got to get out of my way on the screen. So hold on one second. Okay. So most of this board work here in these first few slides is what picked up what was still there from the previous study. Brother Jim and Sister Sue Ellen went over the bulk of these lines already. So we're just leaving them there for review, and then we'll get on with the rest of the study. So she's addressing that there was a question if 1888 was a midway. So if we all understand the study of midway, it came from the Millerite history, and July 21 was midway. And we came to understand that as midway or a midpoint or midnight, and in between April 19th and October 22nd. So somebody was asking if 1888, because in the studies of the revolutions, there were several midpoints, midways. And she says that yes, all of those dates that take us to 2014 are midway in their own history. The reason I didn't speak about 1888 is it doesn't have the theme of a revolution in 1888 in the same way that the others do. So I wanted us to focus on revolutions. That's why I chose these 2 dates, 2 witnesses, American Civil War and the French Revolution, but 1888 is also a midway. Sister Christine, if you wouldn't mind, just by chance, if you are available to do this, if you catch any typos, mark the slide number and just a brief where, and keep track of it.
Okay, I have this slide presentation open. I will do that.
Ah, perfect, thanks. And we can be correcting as we move along. Or not necessarily today, but correcting as we continue doing our presentations. Okay, so a question came after that. I won't answer this question now, but just want to speak about one thought that I feel is expressed in this question. Just as a thought to add to, do you think that issues of microaggressions and race-related biases has been addressed within the context of this movement, speaking from the perspective of a person of color? We deal with microaggressions on a daily basis at work and in common society. Are the movements of white population being educated on the problems with microaggressions in comments and assumptions that are often made about people of color? You have spoken about the external identification of racism and perhaps even sexism. I'm not sure why they say, that was the person's question, so I'm not sure why they say perhaps even sexism. Sexism is not perhaps even. So I find that it's a person who's anonymous, so I'm not embarrassing anyone. I find that phrasing problematic. I've spoken about the external identification of racism and sexism that definitely worldwide exists in a fashion that kills thousands, tens of thousands of women every year, let alone the way that they are abused and held back outside of just murder. I want to discuss one point of that. We'll erase the board now that we've seen these two revolutionary periods taking us to 2014. And if we can hold that in our minds, so these two revolutionary periods, the French Revolution takes us to 2014 and the Civil War, and both of these were 1863 was the midpoint and 1794 was the midpoint. And both those midpoints take us to 2014, which was midway between 9/11 and 2019. So they're all three midpoints or midway. When we discussed racism and sexism and equality, what we did was went back, we could go more complex, we could discuss about the movements that brought us to the time of the end and exist today, from the civil rights movement, second wave feminism and Stonewall. But originally the opening up of the Sunday law subject came from understanding a triple application. 1850 plus 1888 brings us to the Sunday law, and we must combine both of them to understand the sin of the United States at the end of the world. And she's referencing the study that was done in a few different places. And I know Sister Adriana's touched on it, and I know it was in one of the studies that I did, where she lays out early writings or spiritual gifts, and then the Great Controversy, and shows the two histories of 1850 and 1888. And then those two histories come together to help us to understand the Sunday law, or the sin of the United States at the end of the world. And then because of the strong right leading bent that existed in the movement, so there was a strong right leading within the movement, up until last year, we had to be quite emphatic and firm with the words that we used. But there has been a major, I'm going to say, twisting of that message that has caused some misdirection. I tried to say this gently many times before, but I think with this question, not to answer the question directly, but I need to make that point, and I want us to have it in our minds as we go back into these studies. We are doing a literal to symbolic application. 1850, there is a sin in the United States that relates to slavery. It's slavery where the Black population is put into slavery and made slaves by the white population. It's a black and white issue, and it exists in the United States. When the United States is judged for that in the history of the Civil War on a line, that is the history of the plagues. So 1961 to 1963 is, I'm sorry, that's supposed to be 1861 to 1863 is the plagues falling because of the sin. Is anywhere else in the world experiencing those plagues? No. The time of trouble, the falling of the plagues, the sin is encapsulated inside America. Can we see that? It's just in case inside America and this issue of slavery. When we come to the 1888 history, what is the issue? In 1888, the issue, as I said before, it's the Sunday law, but they also wanted an amendment to the Constitution. So are we going to experience a Sunday law today? No, there is no Sunday law going to come into effect. There's a couple of spots in this video, and I don't know if Sister Sue and Brother Jim had problems with any of the previous videos, but there was a couple of spots where the video was unaudible, the audio was inaudible. So there's a couple of little short portions, and I was not able to put it together. So 1850 closed, and 1888 starts to open up, and it becomes an issue of church and state. what happens in our own dispensation? In our own dispensation, it's worldwide. In 1850, it's closed. In 1888, it opens up. In 144,000, it's worldwide. But there is no literal Sunday law in the 1888 history. The theme that we take from that is the coming together of church and state. There's no slavery in the Sunday law issue. There is no slavery in the Sunday law issue. What is the theme? What was the issue in 1850, the core issue? Why didn't they want Mexicans? It's because they considered them interbred. Those coming from South America, there were indigenous populations, there were European populations they didn't want. There was a mixing of the people happening in Mexico. But when the United States annexed Texas, they said, we don't even want Mexico. You keep Mexico. We don't want to dilute our race. The issue is nationalism. Did somebody have a comment?
I was just questioning, it said, but there is no literal Sunday law in the 1888 history. I don't understand that.
When we go back, from what I do understand it, some of you guys are a lot better with the 1888 history than I am. One of the things that I remember always understanding is that, and I don't know if this is the point, but A.T. Jones did not argue that we could keep Sabbath. He argued for the rights of all people. And maybe somebody else has a better, if that's an incorrect answer, let me know, but that's what I am understanding from what my own personal experience with reading A.T. Jones. He wasn't arguing for the right to keep the true Sabbath. He was arguing for the rights of all people.
Is that what that, sorry, go ahead.
Wait, are you asking if there was a literal Sunday law or not in 1888? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, it says, but there is no literal Sunday law in the 1888 history. That's what she read.
Because it didn't happen, right?
But there is no literal Sunday law in the 1888 history. The theme that we take from there is the coming together of church and state and trying to and the arguments that he made was, yeah, I think what Adriana's saying is correct too, that it never came to fruition. But the arguments that A.T. Jones made was not that we could be free to keep the Sabbath or that this was the true Sabbath. The arguments that he made were for the rights of all people.
Yeah, I
Right.
think I'm confused too, like John is, because they were trying to pass a literal Sunday law then.
There were literal state Sunday laws in
The blue laws, et cetera, right?
Yeah, and then that world fair thing, isn't that what they were trying to pass? And A.T. Jones, that's what he went to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm confused too, why it says, but there is no literal Is it just because it didn't pass because A.T. Jones diverted it with his arguments? Is that why?
I would say go back. I'm pretty sure I got the wording all correct here, but go back and make sure the context is all correct. But I transcribed word for word, plus or minus any errors I might make. But I marked it where there was inaudible, where the places where it was inaudible, and there's only a few places that was at. So the best that I understand it to be is that he wasn't, they were realizing that they were trying to bring church and state together, and the argument that A.T. Jones was making was against church and state and the union of church and state.
Mm.
Right, I just want to chime in that Elaine's understanding is my understanding also. That A.T. Jones wasn't there to say Saturday's the Sabbath and not Sunday. And so in that respect, it wasn't about a Sunday law. A.T. Jones was there to say, if you want to keep Wednesday holy, that's your right and your freedom. That it was about separation of church and state and, equal rights for everyone. He said, if you stood here and said, I want to make Saturday the Sabbath, I would argue against it.
Right.
Make Saturday the day of worship. He would argue against it because that's not what he was there for. He was there for everybody's rights, not his right to observe Saturday as the Sabbath.
I think too.
So in that,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, in that sense, there was no literal Sunday law, though the whole case was brought to court by they were trying to enforce a Sunday law. So I get the confusion. I understand what people are confused about. It just seeing it with a different lens, I think.
And seeing the issue of church and state, because it's in this study that she goes on and talks about not having understood correctly the 1888 message, and that God was pointing her to this history, saying, letting us know that we do not understand this history. So they wanted to amend the Constitution. They wanted to make it a Christian nation, and that was the issue. You know, you go through and see that the issue was wanting to amend the Constitution, but when we come to our history, we know that they don't want to amend the Constitution. They just read it as a Christian, as the Constitution states us as a Christian nation when we're not. So I guess it was.
I want to point to the chat because Tiffany had a question in the chat. If we're done with this, I don't want to stop the discussion on 1888 because hers is a different. It says, sorry, I had a question too. What is meant by it's closed in 1850?
It's closed. Let me back and read this slide. So 1850, it's 1850 closed, not it's closed. 1850, the history here closed. And then we come to the 1888 history, and this issue, it opens up, becomes an issue of church and state. So this history is now closed and past, and now in here it becomes an issue of church and state. And what she's emphasizing here is that this issue was encapsulated in the United States. It was not worldwide, where it's worldwide here. So in that particular point, that's what she's making, is that the history here with the Millerites and the Seventh-day Adventists, it only involved the United States. It was not worldwide. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I think
I
it's
wanted
also,
to make a comment too.
What?
I wanted to make a comment.
Yeah.
In the Chicago Fair, World's Fair, I think that was 1893. There ended up being a compromise about that, and it went all the way to Congress, and I can't remember why exactly, except for they had something to do with giving them funds because it was a World's Fair. Anyway, they closed. What they did is they didn't close the fair on Sunday, but they didn't allow any of the exhibits that had moving parts to them, because they had exhibits that showed, like from Thomas Edison and Tesla and different things like that, that had electricity and the Ferris wheel and stuff like that. They closed those exhibits that had moving parts, but people could go to the fairgrounds and walk around and look and have a picnic or something like that. But, the whole reason people wanted to go there was to see these new inventions. So it was kind of a compromise, and the people that were behind it were the churches. They organized around that Chicago area because they wanted people to go to church and not go to the fair. So just thinking about it being a compromise kind of makes me think, that's what we're talking about in this era as we come up to a compromise.
Anybody else?
yeah, I just wanted to say that also if it, in the end, at the end of the world, the success actually looks like failure, just like in the story of, on the line of Christ, where with Christ's crucifixion, it looked like complete failure. So the same way Elder Parminder shows that at the end of the world, it's Elijah that is being destroyed, versus in the story of Elijah, where he's the one who destroys the false prophet. So that if in 1888, if the Sunday law would have passed, national Sunday law would have passed and the constitutional amendment would have been, passed, Jesus would have come in that, I think, in that history. So what I mean is that it would have looked like failure again. So the same way in the history of success, it has to look like, on the outside is going to look like failure because Elijah is not the one that's doing the persecuting, not to say doing the persecuting. He's not the one slaying the false prophets, but he's the one being slain. And it doesn't have to be literal.
Right. Okay, so those coming from South America, there were indigenous populations, there were European populations that they didn't want. There was a mixing of the people happening in Mexico. But when the United States annexed Texas, they said, we don't even want Mexico. You keep Mexico, we don't want to dilute our race. And the issue is nationalism. So our history, the issue is nationalism. We see this coming together of church and state. The point that I want to make is the application of 1850 today is worldwide, is not condensed in the United States, and it's much, much broader than an issue between black and white. It is an issue of nationalism, and anyone can be nationalist. I've said before, I went to the United States, I taught the message of equality, and what did FFA say? Who are you, you European socialist, to come and tell us how to behave? I went to Uganda, and what did they tell me? Who are you, you white colonialist, Westerner, to come to our country and tell us how to behave? What's the equal issue of the United States and in Uganda, in America and Africa? Nationalism. It does not become condensed into the issue of color. Color is part of that, but it is so much broader than we realize, and it cannot be limited to just color. That's what we're seeing as we're going through that document on Fit for the Constitution as well, and how we trace nationalism, the problem that it's existed since the beginning of this nation. If we speak only of color, we risk failing the test ourselves. People are often shouting for equality when it comes to color and actually do that from the platform of nationalism. If we don't see the test as clearly as we must, there's a danger that we fail it. Someone says internally we addressed sexism, but I'm not currently seeing the racism issue being tackled as enthusiastically. The reason that much is being said about sexism is because people in the movement, as far as I can see, online are not practicing equality when it comes to sexism to nearly the same degree that they're practicing equality when it comes to color. We understand why do these issues come in 3 steps. I've taught this multiple times. Racism, sexism, and homophobia. Why are we targeting sexism? Because people feel they understand racism while they don't. When people feel they understand racism, there's a sense they've passed the test because they can say Black Lives Matter. Martin Luther King was a sexist. One test comes after the other. It's harder than the other. And sexism is still being openly, overtly practiced in this movement, even by people who say Black Lives Matter. I wanted to make the point at 1850, it's enclosed in the United States. The slavery issue and everything that was going on was enclosed here in the United States. It's an issue between black and white. We must see it today as universal and not condensed into just the subject of color. It is, but unless we can see our own nationalism, whatever color we are, if we are Black and if we are in Africa, we face the same risk of failing that test if we're white and in America. And that was very evidenced with how some people took the subject of sexism. Because the minute a white woman from the West tells you to stop paying dowry, all of a sudden, it's my culture, it's my country, and I'm proud of where I come from. We do not have a dual citizenship. This issue of racism is not condensed to the United States. It's not condensed to the subject of color. Everyone is facing the same test of nationalism, no matter the color of the skin or the country that they come from. It's an issue for everyone. So that has been in some ways misdirected. Yes, it is part of that. The issues in America right now are part of that issue, but we have to look globally. The message of equality was for us to turn to those around us and see how we are hurting them. It was for us to look inside and see our own sins, our own nationalism, our own sexism, our own homophobia, and to deal with ourselves. It wasn't for us to fight for our own rights. It was to see how we are hurting the rights of other people. And sexism is so deeply embedded in this movement, people cannot see it, cannot even see it when it's overtly practiced. And I don't want to get sidetracked. So that was a question that she was answering. I don't know if I just hit one too many. So how would Christ have come in 1863 if the conflict was local and not worldwide? We face the same issue today. What does worldwide mean? We have no people in the movement that I'm aware of, and here's another little spot where it was inaudible, but it was just a little short snippet. We have no people in the movement that I'm aware of. People will go to heaven who are not properly trained and properly prepared. That's why we have a heavy burden. That's why we have to live so true to the lines and what God teaches, because it is our duty to teach them. If Christ had come back in 1863, there would have been many sins still practiced. Racism would not have been understood as being the depth of sin that it was, even as much as we understand it today. They would have had to experience in heaven the growth and understanding that we have had to come to 150 years later. They would have had to come to the same position that we have on equality for women. There wouldn't have been barely a single person in heaven who truly understood equality in the home. All of that would have to have taken place in heaven. Which brings the question, how much do we still have to learn? Do we think we're going to heaven perfect? Or do we continue to be challenged? I think we have a lot to learn in 1,000 years, perhaps more than we can realize. We'll look forward to that journey if we see it's for our benefit. Back to the revolutions. I don't want to go through all of these revolutions. There's charts done where they're easy to see, nicely drawn. Some very talented people have been helpful to us there and laid out those waymarks for us. I just want to remind us of the application. When we discuss the revolutions, what are we discussing? I'd like to suggest is what was said before. We're discussing the transformation of the United States from a republic to a dictatorship. We're discussing the changing of kingdoms. When you look at Russia, you can see that it had transitioned from a dictatorship, communist dictatorship. It had transformed into at least the beginning steps of a fragile democracy. And then Vladimir Putin has pulled it back into being a dictatorship. He did that through a process. He became president in 1999. He was elected in 2000, re-elected in 2004, stood down in 2008 because he couldn't run again, and came back again in 2012. Changed the time span of a term to 6 years instead of 4. In 2018, he's elected again to 2024. He's already set himself up to run a third term by changing the Russian constitution. So there are all of these points along the way where you can mark Russia transforming from a fledgling democracy to a dictatorship. But it's happening progressively in subtle steps that if someone in an information age wants to deny, they can. Kind of like you can't see it because it's such a slow moving process, you don't see it. And I can say that from my own understanding of everything that we've been learning. Looking back, we can see all these steps and realize and see the progression that has happened, and it's been silently working, secretly working And as we learned yesterday, secrets are prophecy, prophecy or secrets. So these secrets, so we are understanding these things and being able to have our eyes open and see the progression of going from one kingdom to the next, from a republic to a dictatorship. The exact same thing is happening within the United States, the transformation of a democracy into a dictatorship. And what these lines of the revolutions enable us to do is to see how that process occurs. It takes us through some specific steps along that journey. When the United States passes a Sunday law, that waymark, it must already be set up in such a position that it can do that. The United States has strong institutions. It's got 3 branches of government holding each other in check. For the United States to do such an action at the Sunday law, it must be enabled to do that. If it's to break that Republican horn, there must have been a process by which those branches of government are structured in such a way that enables it to do that. There must be a restructuring of the executive branch, of the judicial branch, and of the legislative branch, just as Vladimir Putin, through 2004, 2008, 2018, he has restructured Russia to be able to set himself up in a position of power that he has, uniting church and state in that process. What we're seeing is that exact same thing occurring in the United States, and it's just as subtle. All of that must happen before the United States can even consider placing a Sunday law. Does anybody have comments or questions?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. It says, does anyone know what she means when she says that examples of how sexism still exists within the movement? Parminder mentioned it recently too, and said that the men are failing the test. But I've always been confused of what specifically they are talking about, as many others have also. That was a question by Jonathan. And then Lana answered, looks like these are instances where people reflect sexism in the movement. I was not sure about it too, but if you follow Elder Tess's presentations, she sometimes shares those instances. Then Kathy Brown says, I think we need to ask Elder Parminder and Tess, as she just said we are blind. Jonathan said that he'd already sent a message to, a question to Elder Parminder a few weeks ago. So anyway, that was a little.
Yeah, a little lot to add to that is if you combine the questions about sexism with other statements that have been made in some of the presentations about hierarchy, you can put that into that subject, because that's been brought up with the sexism, that the practice of hierarchy also is involved in that. So if that helps with the thought process of sexism in the movement, where there might be still a hierarchy in the family.
Oh, okay. So in the families and I guess some of the villages and stuff too. Like I just wasn't sure if it was on a personal level, because I know that with a lot of the ministries have restructured so that the equality is more recognizable in leadership. And
yeah, there's that too.
And it wasn't the last series that Parminder did, but it was whatever was before that, where he had mentioned it, and it was quite a stark comment when he said it, that the men were failing. And I'm sure many of the men were probably thinking at that time, if they did, unless I just didn't understand it. Well, but thinking like, what is it that we're doing? Is there something on a personal level that I need to be aware of? How do they know?
Yeah, because the hierarchy is not just, and I said family, but it's not just within the family. The hierarchy also is those that are resisting and rejecting female leaders.
Okay, so it's something more blatant and obvious.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know that I'm sure there are both going on, and it's like she says, it's so. She didn't say it this way. I'm trying to remember how she said it a few slides back, but. It's so deep, it is so deeply rooted that it's something that is so, what does she say, overtly being practiced and not recognizing that we're overtly practicing it. But I know that from presentations that we've heard, what the two issues that have been mentioned along with sexism that I have put together, and correct me if there's more or what have you, but the two issues that seem to be in those studies is the rejection of female leaders and then a hierarchy as well, and sexism in the family.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah. The best way to change a government, whether it's from a democratic government to a dictatorial government, or to change a dictatorial government to a democratic government, the usual way that occurs is through revolution or civil war. It's very hard to change the institutions of a country without that degree of activism and effort. So this change is going to occur by revolution or civil war. What the lines of revolution enable us to see is to see that transformation happen in two parts, much like other revolutions in history. It takes us from the beginning of a revolution to its end. This is just what we have drawn above, 9/11 to 2019, and 2014 is the midway point in that history. That's the history of a revolution as it's given to us in the American Civil War and in the French Revolution. But then as we overlay the German, the Russian, and the second application of the French Revolution, we identified that there was just one part of that was just one part of that history. That's the history by which the United States transforms from a democracy to a dictatorship. And that's 2019, November 9, 2019, the end point of that revolutionary period. So you have this period of revolution, but we're going to see it goes into when we add to it the second application of the French Revolution, and then the Russian and German, we'll see the rest of it. So then we marked a period of quiet until 2020, this period of quiet in here. So you mark the end of this part of the revolution and bringing us to this transformation to a dictatorship. And then there's a period of quiet here at the beginning of a counter-revolution. If we were to mark the other histories that we have connected with 9/11 to 2019, we have the French Revolution and the American Civil War. What takes us from this history, 9/11, is the German Revolution, right here, October 30th, 1918, to November 9, 1919. The counter-revolution begins January 1919, or 2020 on our line, and then ends May 9, 1919. Then we took the Russian Revolution, which was March 8, 1917, and it ended November 9, 1917. And then 1918 was the counter-revolution, and it ended in 1922. Then we took the French Revolution, its whole expansive history. We took it from 1789 by their own revolutionary calendar to the 9th day of the 11th month. That was the Thermidorian calendar, I believe, from their own calendar, of 1794. Then the counter-revolution in 1795 and ending in 1799. So we saw a period of revolution that overturns the government from a democracy, in this case, to a dictatorship. And then we see a period of quiet from these other lines, and then we see a counter-revolution. We use those histories to understand our own revolution, 9/11 to 2019, that overthrows the establishment, taking us back to last night's study with Ipsos, to overthrow the establishment, as many people would call it. Then the following year, there's a counter-revolution that begins against this new establishment. I've discussed particularly in Australia in November and December of 2019, mostly early December. Then in late December and early January in Kenya, there were presentations at a camp meeting done there where we spoke about what happened between 9/11 and 2019. As we place where we are on the line, I just want us to see we are in this period, in this time period here. It's covering these revolutions in a way that isn't really just one fixed dispensation. Excuse me. It's showing how the United States is transforming. Let me get some water, hang on. or somebody else will have to read in a minute. It's showing how the United States is transforming. One way of showing this transformation of the United States. What does a dictatorship in the United States look like? What would we expect it to look like? If we think about Vladimir Putin, his people voted him into office, and he has a very high popularity rating compared to most world leaders. Distractions everywhere, sorry. So he has a very high popularity rating compared to most world leaders. It has slipped a little, but it is still high. He wins his elections easily. Yes, there is voter fraud, but the fraud is there to enhance the degree by which he wins. Yes, he kills his political opponents. Yes, he silences them. But many Russians still believe in him as their democratically elected leader that they chose and want, that gives some glory back to Russia. So we have to consider in a history of information what dictatorship looks like. Back in 1888, when the Constitution had been physically changed, yes, there would have been an amendment to the Constitution. If that had happened early enough, they may have scrapped the whole thing. By the 1880s, it would have been amended. Is it going to be amended today? No. All that they do is say, if you think the Constitution protects minority rights, you're reading it wrong. It'll be about how you read. These subjects become more difficult to identify. A dictatorship is more difficult to identify today because they keep a degree of deniability. Russia still has its institutions, its parliament, its elections, its constitutions, all of that intact. Vladimir Putin has just been able to manipulate that system. So it'll be about how we read, because they're reading the Constitution now and interpreting it as it already is a Christian document and it doesn't need to be amended today. These lines mark the beginning. These lines mark the beginning of the process in the United States towards this system as beginning in 2001. I want us to think about why it would do that. What happens in 2001? I'm going to read a little from articles. This actually is a YouTube clip that I've watched him, and I've transcribed what he's saying. I'm quoting Gideon Rose. Gideon Rose was the editor of Foreign Affairs. He was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He served as Associate Director for Near East and South Asia Affairs on the staff of the National Security Council from 1994 to 1995 under the Clinton administration. So he's worked particularly for the Democrats. Quoting him, 9/11 has changed US foreign policy dramatically in two ways. The first and more obvious way was in bringing the issue of terrorism in general and radical Islamist terrorism in particular to the forefront of US foreign policy agenda. During the 1990s, specialists in terrorist events had noted events like the first World Trade Center bombing, the Oklahoma City bombing. They had started to worry about the rise of terrorism. So they already in the 1990s started noting the rise of terrorism and were concerned about it. Some in the Middle East were worried about the rise of Islamic radicalism. What 9/11 did was to combine those trends and make everybody realize that it was the single most important challenge to American foreign policy. The combination of Islamist radicalism and large-scale massive terrorism with mass casualty impact. These lines mark the beginning of the process in the United States towards this system as beginning in 2001. I want us to think about why it would do that. What happens in 2001? Did I go backwards? How do we go backwards here?
Yeah, you went one page back. Go one more. Basically there.
Basically made everybody from top to bottom realize that this was what we had to focus on, and this really could hurt us in only the way that a few specialists had thought before. So that's the first way that 9/11 changed the US foreign policy. That's not the one I want to focus on. I want us to focus on the second change. Quoting again Gideon Rose, the second thing it did, which was perhaps less obvious, was that he unleashed US power on the world. This sounds a bit weird because the US was obviously powerful before him. But during the 1990s, unlike what many people expected, the unipolar moment, as Charles Krauthammer put it in 1991, I believe in foreign affairs, turned out to not be a short temporary period of American dominance, but rather an ongoing and growing one. With the Soviet Union gone, the United States was at the top of the heap. But in the decade of the 1990s, it actually lacked the rest of the world even more so. So it was even stronger in relative power in terms 2000 than it had been in 1990. So if that's complicated at all, I do have a link that takes you, I could not find like the entire video, I found pieces of it, and it's in these notes. So you can go back and review that if you want to. So what he's saying is that in the world, the global order went from bipolar, United States, Soviet Union, to unipolar at the beginning of the 1990s. And then through the 1990s, America continued to become more and more powerful. And yet, because of domestic political constraints, the United States domestic political constraints, the United States basically didn't use this power in major dramatic ways. So America has condensed power, but it hasn't used power because it has these constraints, these domestic political constraints on its system. The Clinton administration wasn't focused obsessively in projecting American power and wanted to keep it in public limits. And so the American public didn't authorize a lot of things. So the Clinton administration is controlled by the desires of the American public. The Clinton administration does not want to project American power outside what the public in America, outside the limits of what the public in America place upon it. And the American public didn't wish American power be used unilaterally internationally. What 9/11 did was basically have Congress and the American public give the executive branch a blank check to get the people who did this and make sure it didn't happen again. That was essentially the keys to the bank account that essentially unleashed the American power that had been building up and turned it into power projection capabilities. We resulted not just in the Afghanistan campaign, but in the Iraq campaign, in the global war on terror and massive deployment of American resources in power projection and an activist world role, which would not have been conceivable without the immediate trigger of a threat. That threat being 9/11, terrorism. The interesting thing is that in both these trends, we overshot the mark. We went too far, and in retrospect, we can see now that we didn't just get seized. We didn't just get seized with the idea of radical Islamist terrorism. We got obsessed with it. We not only unleashed American power, we squandered American power through its misapplication and misuse. So the irony is that after a decade of dealing with 9/11 and its aftermath, the United States is now coming back to its pre-9/11 condition with a more chastened, less hubristic attitude, a declining power-based domestic situation. We're trying to establish ourselves not just as a global literal hegemon at large, but also to renew it. It has been a sober decade that in the long run will be considered a detour from the path we were on before and that we're going to get back to. He said all this in 2001 under the Obama administration. So what Gideon Rose is saying, the United States defeated the Soviet Union. The global order turned into this unipolar system. The United States built up immense power in the 1990s that was not used under the Clinton administration because of domestic constraints. What happened in 2001 was essentially the keys to the bank vault. It enables the executive branch not just to absorb more power, it had that power, but now to project that power internationally with the approval of Congress and with the approval of much of the American public. What he's saying is that they can see that they overstepped the mark by far. Just one example of that, without going into the history of the countries they destroyed, the thousands of lives that they ended, innocent lives, was just in the fact that they did that against international law. That in itself is a prime example in 2003. What he's saying naively is that it was unleashed in 2001. George Bush used that power internationally, but now it's the Obama administration. Now we have a more chastened, less hubristic attitude under Obama. We're bringing back that overextension. We're reining ourselves in. Essentially, we're becoming more globalist. We're working within an international system of law and order, not our own definition of law and order. His position on that in 2011, I want to suggest, was incorrect. It was not a small detour on the journey of the United States. George Bush was not that detour. Obama was that detour. Now we're back to the same power projection. We're now in the history of Donald Trump, 9 years after he made that claim. So there's the link there in the that's in the notes that you can look up Gideon Rose and you'll find the videos as well. Did everybody follow what she's saying here? Comments or questions?
There's a question, where was the UN in that?
That's what she's talking about, breaking international law. They didn't go along with the UN. They got the support
Yeah, they
of people.
just to interject here with this question, because George Bush, after the 9/11 thing, and to go over to Iraq, he had to convince the American people that this was necessary to do. But I thought during that period there was some intervention there with the UN, but maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I was just thinking back on it, that the UN was involved, but they would have not been able to do what they did. The US wouldn't, if the UN had been involved, because there would have been taken a vote and it wouldn't have gone through. They would not have said, yes, this is something international, not just domestic.
And they had
It would have it looked like it was international, but it was not. It was an attack on the US, which kept it in, domestic.
Yeah, they did have opposition from my memory anyways. We know that the Pope was not in agreement with what we did. We know that there was a threefold union, so to speak, if that's the right way to put it. I don't know. There was a coalition there and I want to remember, I know Russia was one of them, Germany was one of them, and I want to say it was France, maybe it was Britain.
It was Britain, because I remember France didn't go and the US retaliated by not calling French fries anymore. They called them freedom fries.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we started projecting that power globally, and then what she is saying, he's saying that Obama then starts to rein that back in and wants to go more by using the international law system of law and order instead of our own. But she says, I want to suggest that was incorrect. It was not a small detour on the journey of the United States. George Bush was not the detour. Obama was that detour. Now we're back to the same power projections and we're doing the same thing. So if I understand that correctly, so Obama started to slow it back down, but the progress was going to dictatorship. Not all of Congress and not all the American public guided that blank check to the George Bush administration. I don't want to go through all of this for time, but I will just reference a couple of articles. There's an article by the New York Times in June, and she said June in the thing, but when I found the article, it said July, and I'm 99.9% sure I found the right article. But you can look it up, the link is there. New York Times, July 2006. They talk about the partisanship that started to rise after 9/11. Not in the immediate days after, but that event sparked over time this growing partisanship, which is the Civil War, the revolution. You have these two partisan sides who no longer can even understand each other's position, fighting for political and social power. There's always been partisanship. It's existed for a long time, but it occurred after 9/11 in a special way. The divisions on the Iraq War escalated this partisanship to a degree not seen before. The US public was divided more by the Iraq War along party lines than they were for the war in Vietnam by far. If you think the Vietnam War created a partisan divide, it was nothing to what the partisan divide was that occurred due to the Iraq War. Was there another comment or question?
Brother Jonathan put in a link to the Coalition of the Willing.
Okay. Coalition, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. In 2014, Mother Jones put out an article, How the Iraq War Launched the Modern Era of Political, and she put misbehavior because I have the link for the article and you'll find that it wasn't misbehavior that she said, or that the article was titled. So Mother Jones puts out an article, How the Iraq War Launched the Modern Era of Political Misbehavior. There's no debate that the Iraq War was sold to the American public with a collection of claims that ended up being proved false. Iraq was said to have weapons of mass destruction, and this was not the case. Advocates for the war insinuated that Saddam Hussein was colluding with Al Qaeda and somehow involved in the 9/11 attacks. That too was false. It was disinformation. It was a conspiracy theory. Yet many Americans and some of their leaders still believe this. Many Americans today, people worldwide today, still believe that Saddam Hussein was involved in 9/11. They never let go of that disinformation. Since 2003, social scientists, psychologists, and pollsters have been busy examining why false beliefs like these are embraced, even in the face of irrefutable evidence, and what impact this sort of disinformation has on American political discourse. The resulting research shows that the Iraq War looks like an early version of a current phenomenon. They're speaking in 2014 in this particular article. The right wing rooting its stances in simple untruths about the world, see climate change. So here's a quick trip through some of the groundbreaking scholarship on how the Iraq War polarized the US public over the acceptance of basic facts. And then it goes into a pioneering study into the effects of Fox News. What partisanship didn't have prior to 9/11 was such a popular channel as Fox News. It existed in 1996, but it particularly boomed in popularity in 2002. Prior to that time span, while you had partisanship, you did not have these channels promoting and sharing disinformation the way you do today. And the way Fox News took the Iraq War and these divisive issues in the United States drove this partisanship. So we know that they came to be a right-wing Christian, right-wing news channel to steer people that direction. We won't repeat the study for time. The degree of factual polarization over Iraq and the role of partisan media outlets like Fox News in driving it may have marked the dawn of a new normal. Political polarization has increased in the decades since the invasion. So it then goes through various studies that have been done. They give evidence of all this different partisanship and growth of disinformation. Once Americans become polarized over facts, it seems the damage is done. So that article itself is 6 years old, and I think we can see the results of that even today. These revolutions, they mark the beginning of that civil war in 9/11. So the historical revolutions, the lines mark us at 9/11. We come to 2014 and it reaches a point where there's going to be a major swing in that revolution. one side is going to begin to win that war. In 2019, you have the establishment of a dictatorship. It depends on the lines that we use because they show us different markers along this road of progression. Ipsos shows us the dictator arriving when? Ipsos shows us the dictator arriving in 2016. So Ipsos will say Republican horn is broken. Dictator in the United States in 2016. This study will show you a dictator in the United States breaking the Republican horn at 2019, based on what we're looking at here. Another study will show you 2021. Another study will show you the Sunday law. So if everybody followed that, what she's saying is this history is showing us that this progression towards dictatorship, it's in stages, and you can see it in each of these different studies. You can see it in 2016, you can see it in 2019, you can see it in 2021, and you can see it at the Sunday law. What it's marking is in 4 progressive steps, the progression of the United States from a democracy to a dictatorship and the markers along the way. We need to be able to divide those studies and look at them independently. It is reasonable to say that the United States, is it reasonable to say that the United States had a dictator in 2016? I believe yes. Donald Trump was a dictator the moment he arrived, but he's restrained. In 2019, is he a dictator? Yes, but he's still restrained. In 2021, yes, still restrained. All of those leading up to the releasing of those restraints at the Sunday law. So though these questions are Donald Trump, we're looking at it as the US overall as well, as the process of becoming a dictatorship, the progressive steps. In 2014, one side particularly begins to have victory. 2014 was a turning point. And then she asked those online, give me 3 things in 2014 that marked the turning point. And so as the answers started to come in, I recorded each one of them. The Republicans take the Senate. The midterm elections, when they do that, she asked, when they do that, what do they begin to do? There's something specific that begin to do. Another person said Cambridge Analytica. And then someone said block Obama's judges. And that was the work of who? He called it the most important political decision he's made in his entire career, and that was Mitch McConnell. So when the Republicans took the Senate, in the midterm elections, the Republicans took the Senate, Barack Obama's judges began to be blocked, and it's done by Mitch McConnell. In 2014, when Republicans have so much success in those midterm elections, Mitch McConnell, he arrives in a position where he can start blocking Barack Obama from filling any judicial appointments in the United States. Was there a question or a comment?
Just me. I was just wondering, I don't think it's the real thing, but it just seems like Trump was loosed on January 6th last week when his followers attacked the Capitol Hill. Is that an example, kind of, or not?
Loosed? You mean unreasonable?
Like, you know, he said, go ahead and get them, or no, I remember, I listened to the speech, but I don't remember how it goes. It says, you guys all heard how his speech was, and then shortly after, his mob went and attacked the Capitol Hill. Like they went on his word. He says, I'll meet you there, right? He never showed up.
Walk with them.
Yeah. So I was wondering, was that a sample of him, you know?
I think we need to look at the progressive steps of the dictatorship, because here in 2016, we can say yes, and she's saying yes, he's a dictator. He was a dictator when he arrived. But we also have to look at it in the form of the United States as a whole, that the United States becomes a dictatorship, because we see this period of civil war to overturn the establishment, the democracy into a dictatorship. So we see that dictatorship, the steps that got us there. Here's 2014, the turning point in this war that starts to turn the point towards the Republican side. And Trump comes in and he does what he does, but he's restrained, and he does what he does, but he's restrained. But through these progressive steps, if I understand correctly, through these progressive steps, who's going to be in control And how does this dictatorship, what does it look like?
What is his, what do you mean? His
Does it look like Donald Trump?
No, I think he's just a person. I think we're looking at a bigger picture.
Right. So how does the nation speak?
Okay.
Like a dragon.
Well, yeah, but nationalism, like that's what we're looking at, right? How they will enact. Okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but when it's a dictatorship, is it the executive branch that is that dictatorship? How does the nation speak?
Shut down.
No, it's the legislative.
In judicial branches. So okay, so Mitch McConnell, he arrives in a position where he can start blocking Barack Obama fulfilling any judicial appointments in the United States. So that's at the turning point. This led to the judicial branch being completely taken over by conservative right-leaning majority by the end of 2019, including the Supreme Court. I hope we're all following the events of the Supreme Court and the rulings they've been making, even in the last weeks. You have a 5-4 conservative majority in the Supreme Court, and everyone is just hoping that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is holding on to life. And we know that this was back in July prior to her passing away. If she goes, it won't even be mid-right wing. It'll be far right, far wing and far right wing. Next, they begin to purge the Republican Party. So these are the steps that what happened in 2014, blocking Barack Obama's judges. Then they begin to purge the Republican Party. They begin to block Barack Obama from appointing judges to the judiciary branch. One branch of the United States government is going to begin to fall. And then they begin to purge the Republican Party. Every dictatorship must purge their own party of anyone who is not completely loyal to the new dictatorship. It's one of the laws of dictatorship. And that was the work of Steve Bannon, Jeff Sessions, and Stephen Miller. They met in 2012 at a Breitbart embassy. So back here in 2012, we know that history, that's where also we had Elder Parmenter in the message of the Sunday law coming at 2014. So the warning was there. So looking at the external and the internal. So they met in 2012 at Breitbart Embassy and planned how they would turn America around. The first step they decided to take, and consider what the other article was talking about, how this period of time with Obama was in here, where Obama was doing things according to the Constitution and the right rule of law and international law. And when Obama was elected that second term, that was what angered them, enraged them so much that in 2012, this is when Bannon, Sessions, and Steve Miller get together and they want to turn things around. So then what happens here in the 2014 midterm elections is the Republicans take over control, and then they start this work. So they begin to block Obama's judge appointments, and then they begin to purge the Republican Party. So they planned how they would turn America around. The first step they decided to take was to purge the Republican Party of any moderates. Anyone who was a moderate Republican needed to be removed. They needed only far right loyalists. And think about what we saw and what the more and more news comes out on what happened January 6th. Look at some of those Republicans. Look at all those Republicans, 120 of them, was it 120 of them in the House that still stood up for Donald Trump, and the election was stolen, and to overturn the election, you had senators that were still saying the same thing. And you have the gun-toting, what's her name, Lauren, I don't know how to say her last name, maybe somebody knows. The gun-toting one's gonna take her gun in there, and these far-right people are now in as lawmakers. That came up earlier where, I don't remember if it was in a prayer somebody said, but I was thinking about it's the lawmakers too. It's not just the Capitol Police, it's not just the National Guard or the military, it's also the lawmakers themselves that now have infiltrated within. So they're doing their jobs based on their ideology and not according to their job description. So anyway, so they purged the party, and they begin in 2014 when they united with Fox News and they removed the first head they needed to put on a spike of the Republican Party. And I'm pretty sure, maybe somebody remembers, was it Eric Kander? Is that the one? Is that his name?
Yeah, that's the guy that Obama, I forget how you explain it. That's the guy that was Republican, right? And
Yes,
he,
he was the Speaker
yeah.
of the House, I
He
think.
was a moderate, I think. They had to take him.
Right.
Was he a Speaker of the House? Is that what he was, I think? I can't remember.
Yes, he was Speaker of the House.
Okay. And so they removed him. And as they said, that the first head they needed to put on a spike of the Republican Party.
I think Sister Jackie had a question there.
Go ahead, Sister Jackie.
Yes, I wrote it down, but my question is, pre-Bannon and maybe even before him, were the Tea Party, that's when, you
Right.
know, it started to transition in that time too,
Yeah, the Tea Party is
with the
part of
Tea
it.
Party.
Yeah, the Tea Party is definitely part of it because that's what kind of gave rise to Donald Trump coming in as well. So,
Yeah, I had a lot to do with it.
yeah. So once they
So-
got control though, in 2014, then they were able to start taking action.
Yeah, because they tried to get Sarah Palin in there. She was from representing the Tea Party. I mean, the people that had the ideology of Sarah Palin. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. I can't remember all their names, but they were pre-Trump, and that would have been before Obama, because Obama followed was just before Trump for 8 years.
Didn't they try to nominate her for vice president or something?
Yeah,
Yes.
with McCain.
Yeah.
Right, McCain, right.
Yeah, it was when McCain ran against Obama, and Sarah Palin was McCain's vice presidential nominee.
Right.
That's right. So yeah, I just interjected that because it is part of the progression.
Right. So the third event in 2014, we're looking for a Supreme Court decision, and that was Burwell versus Hobby Lobby stores. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4, 5 men and 3 women and a man against 3 men. So there was 5 men that voted for, 3 women and a man against, but the 5 took it, allowing closely held for-profit corporations to be exempt from a regulation its owners religiously objected to. This happened just in the last few weeks. This ruling has been extended even further under the Trump administration, but it ties back to a 2014 decision. It was about whether or not someone owned a company, a for-profit corporation, whether or not they would, in their employees' health insurance, be forced to cover birth control if the owners were in their religious beliefs opposed to it. The Supreme Court judged they would not be required. And I think it's interesting because I always come back to Daniel. Thinking of Daniel, of the 3, I think they called them presidents or governors underneath Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel didn't go in there with his ideology. He did his job according to his job function. And nothing was causing him to and this is a lesson for all of us as we've grown in this message to know that God would have us to do our jobs as our job description. But we know the problem doesn't come in until what we're told to do causes us to break God's law. So Daniel did his job according to his job description, and so here you have Hobby Lobby. They don't want to support birth control in the health plan because it's against their religious beliefs. Well, that just means then that the people that are working for Hobby Lobby can no longer have birth control if they want it. It's their right to have it, but you can't because your employer says we don't support it because it's against our religion. And so the link is there too for a pretty good article to read as well. I read some of that. So go back and see how Ruth Bader Ginsburg responded to that ruling. And I have a little bit of it in here. She called it a fearful precedent, or part of the article. What would come from that? Americans united for the separation of church and state, they say, such approaches, while important, are just a start. The ruling in Hobby Lobby goes beyond the question of access to birth control. It opens a door that could lead to a dangerous reinterpretation of the meaning of religious freedom. Under this new definition, that noble principle, which for a long time had protected the rights of Americans, becomes a thing to be used to impose theology on the unwilling. This cannot stand. Americans must take the necessary steps to prevent and further spread of this corrosive and reckless definition of religious freedom. And we can see that that decision has had implication. It had come to erode in religious freedom. And this was another spot where it was inaudible. Even just showing in the court case a few weeks ago that expanded this decision again. Ruth Bader Ginsburg and I think Sotomayor, how you say her name? Sotomayor, both stood against that as well. So there's a Supreme Court decision that has far-reaching consequences. This is all 2014. There's the beginning of the purge of the Republican Party in preparation for this dictatorship. And there's a blocking of Obama from appointing judges, the taking over of the judiciary branch. So 2014 becomes a major turning point. 2019, I'll ask this question before we close. What did you expect to see November 9th? Because all of the studies of the revolutions is what locked in November 9th as a date. So what do people expect to see on November 9th? What were many people expecting to see on the actual day? Someone says a dictator. Based on this study, going back to your thoughts last year, some of you thought that way. These are comments and stuff that she's going through the chat. Putin taking more spheres of influence, impeachment, another one said impeachment, a turning point towards more violent persecutions of minorities. Some said nothing. Good for you, you understood the cross, impeachment. So what we would have expected to see was impeachment, understanding the cross, the final overthrow of the Republican Party. Now think on that very day, the final overthrow of the Republican Party. Now think on that very day and overturning a disappointment. FFA laughed because there's no impeachment. A media restraint, that's actually quite a broad spectrum of answers. So these are all people answering in the chat. So I'll only leave us with one question. Why would we expect impeachment on November 9? Because impeachment in 1868 did not happen on November 9. It took us to the year, not a day in a year. I think we should be clear that we would never have expected, do not expect impeachment to relate to November 9 as a day. The other questions we'll come back to. And here's her prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for our blessings. Lord, our hearts ache as we know many of our brothers and sisters are battling through this time. Many, Lord, are considering whether or not this path is worth it. Many see beauty in the lines, but too much that troubles them. Many people are hurting, Lord. I pray that you will help us to anchor them in your truth. Lord, may they see beauty in these things. May they see that in everything you demand of us, everything that you teach us is for our healing and restoration. How little do we still understand your character? How do we truly understand the depths of sin? It seems, Lord, that we are blind back in the 1800s. People were blind to the depths of sin as it relates to equality, not just on racism, but on how deep that runs within us when it turns to nationalism, when it stems from nationalism, when headship was not a thing to be questioned. Lord, we see that back then people could not realize the depth of sin. We wonder what we can see clearly today. I pray, Lord, that we'll trust to use your eyes to see truth and error as it is. May we not trust our own feelings, our own inclinations, what we want to do, our own desires, May we trust what you tell us. I pray, Lord, that you will help us through this difficult part in our journey. Reinforce to us the beauty of our lines. May each one of us see how you have led us in the past. May we trust how you led us and not be given cause to doubt our past experience. May we see that you do not lead us into the wilderness to destroy us in the wilderness. Many may not make it through, Lord, but we still desire everyone. We love every soul, so I pray for them. Please, Lord, do not let them go easily. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
So November 9th, what was the conclusion? What
She left it at that. That's
so
what
there was no
she left
conclusion.
it at that. I think that I've heard it said that it's not fully understood all of what November 9 fully is, but it does show that the dictatorship on the lines arrives. But the dictatorship was a progressive thing that began in 2016.
So with November 9th being the cross, the disciples didn't understand the cross until afterwards, but when they had their upper room experience, that's where everything, where their understanding came together.
Yes.
So should we expect to have a better understanding of November 9th prior to the formalization?
I don't know, I can't answer that. I would think so, because that's what they were doing and they were coming to better understand. We don't, but if anybody else correct me on this, but I'm sure that I've heard her at times say too that 2019 isn't, or November 9 isn't completely understood.
Yeah, I remember her saying that, which is why I was kind of wondering, just because, I mean, if that's what the lines say, then that's what we should expect, I would assume.
Yeah. Yeah. But we can see through the revolutions where they take us, and the revolutions take us on multiple lines at this overturning, as I think is where she had, is the overturning of the Republican Party. But we know that, or yeah, is that right? That's how it was worded in there. But this, but you know, there's so many different lines to bring together to understand it. But the lines of the revolutions definitely marked November 9 in several of those revolutions. So specifically, but we can see that we can see this history here of being civil war, and we just went through how it began. It's really interesting to go through all these details and see how we weren't acting globally with the power that we had. But then when 9/11 happens, we start fixing our eyes on terrorism, and now you get public support to start projecting that power and acting outside international law. But then Obama comes along and he starts reining that in and starts acting correctly on international law. And then in 2014, I mean, when the midterm elections, they're angered in 2012 when Obama wins again against Mitt Romney, right? And so in 2014, they win the midterm elections, and that puts Mitch McConnell in place at blocking Obama's judges. And so they block the judges, they begin to purge the Republican Party. So they're preparing for this period here. They're doing this work to prepare for this period here and for their going forward. And then also the Burwell versus Hobby Lobby, showing they're using the power that they are and taking their different interpretation of religious freedom. Religious freedom mean that, okay, we're Seventh-day Adventists, so we have if we're the bakery, right? We're the bakery, are we gonna serve non-Sabbath keepers? You know, we're gonna do our job. And I sent some of those quotes to my kids, and I said, and it was really interesting. I shared this with a couple of people, but I shared some comments out of this, out of that Hobby Lobby ruling to my kids, and my son responded back that Jesus would have been baking the cake and befriending them, and I was like, praise the Lord, you know, that he's where he's at, and he's seen that. Because people aren't understanding that. They're thinking that because you know, your religion doesn't believe in birth control, therefore you have to then now impose this on everyone else when it's not their belief.
Right.
And you don't have the right to impose it, but what the Supreme Court said is you do, opening up the door for changing the whole direction of religious freedom. So now with the courts all in place, so their idea of religious freedom is you're not going to infringe on my religious freedom, and your heathen ways are not going to. You know, that document that I was reading last night, this morning, that I shared with some on the know nothings, it's just added more information to their mindset of what they want to do. And I know there's got to be some sort of fulfillment of the know nothings when we continue to go forward, because
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning because someone else posted something about the Boogaloo Boys, and like I was reading on it. I don't know if you read it, if it was in one of the WhatsApp, but they're kind of like the Proud Boys, but they're not.
Yeah.
Their values are different, and
anti-government, right? Anti-government.
Right, and they almost sounded like the know nothings, like they're this mixture of people. It almost sounds like they're kind of on both sides because that article that, or when I was reading up on the know nothings, it sounded like they were progressive, but they
Like
were
anarchists?
they were Democrat or
Are
Yeah,
yeah,
they're
possibly. I mean,
anarchists. They
you
were
could,
definitely anarchists. They hate government and they don't like police or military or anything.
That's the Boogaloo,
the
not
Boogaloo Boys or the
Oh, what? I thought you guys were talking about the Boogaloos.
yeah. I think that some were confusing.
Yeah, I was just trying to keep
Jonathan, between the know nothings and the Boogaloos. The know nothings wanted to be a political party, but you're right in saying that they wanted to be a political party that didn't take up the two sides. What they did, they were part of, it was part secrecy, and then why am I missing one word? I don't want to say it was Americanism, maybe it was Americanism, but in Protestantism, patriot, something like that.
Yeah, they were Protestant, yeah, in that time.
Yeah, in Protestantism. So they got people in through secrecy, and they had their issues being in secret. But what they showed publicly was this, you know, commonality of Americanism. But then as they continued to progress, you started to see what their idea and picture of Americanism was, and it was all anti-Catholic. It was absolutely anti-Catholic to not let the Catholics have any kind of reign anywhere whatsoever. And it's really interesting, as I was reading that, the thoughts I was having about how the mother, right? The mother loses her dominion, so to speak, if that's the way to call it. And then you have the daughter is the daughter, the one that the daughter is kicking out in that particular story is the Catholics. And the Catholics are in the list of the five, the threat of the five: the Jews, the Catholics, the Mormons, the Seventh-day Adventists, and the free thinkers. So here they are boasting and proud of their Americanism, and they're doing the very same thing against the Catholics that the Catholics did against the Christians. Yeah, it was in the Know Nothing group anyways. But it's the same thing overall in the bigger picture.
Can I just say real quick?
Another interesting part.
Sorry, no, there's a lag. Go for it, John.
Oh no, go for it. That's okay.
I think I might take us off topic a little bit, so you say what you needed.
Well, I was just thinking about the different factions that were involved in the time of 1850 or around the Fugitive Slave Act. And then you see all these different factions around what's going on right now. The protests that were raiding the Proud Boys, the Boogaloo Boys, Patriots, the Builders. There's all these different little groups of people, and it's all political. And when you think about the Whig Party, like the Whig Party was the Progressive Liberal Party in 1850, and they split at that time into two groups, into the Liberty Party and Republican Party. So it's really hard to kind of keep up because have Trump's base and the Liberal Party that was today, they seem fairly united. They kind of all united together to get Trump out. So I just, there's so many different dynamics to it that it's kind of hard to keep in track as to who's who and what's what and what's actually going to happen. Anyway, that's all I had to say.
If you're going to change the subject, let me just comment on what he said then. Because what I'm getting out of the book, The Evangelicals, is that when you look at the history, the different histories that we're looking at, different periods in time, is that they didn't come together. During the time of Billy Graham, early days of Billy Graham, the book, right, she talks about how, you know, they didn't come together. They were scattered on what they believed and all their different beliefs. So imagine what happens when they all come together and they all unite. Go ahead, Sister Adriana.
One thing I was gonna say, and this is what makes it so difficult for us to ever be able to speak to people on the conservative side, although we still treat them with kindness and decency as we are always supposed to do. But Monday, when I got to work, my boss was very, very upset that they're censoring Trump and taking him off Twitter and everything. And I don't want to get on that. What she ended up talking to me about is how she's learning about the Whig Party and all this American history from this website that's unbiased that she found. I'm trying to find that website, but what this website is doing is it's taking all the Hillsdale College. There it is. I had to look at my search history. Hillsdale College is this website that's now offering to basically the conservative stream of information is going to them for historical reference to understand American history and how it looks. And they're saying that it's unbiased, but what it is this guy got mad at the History Channel for how it keeps pushing how slavery was a thing and all this stuff. And he's saying, well, this is just, we're too focused on that. We're not looking at the great roots of America or whatever. It basically is conservative leaning, and they're getting all their history information from there now. So it's not just us who are looking back at our history trying to understand it. There's a second stream to that as well happening with this Hillsdale College, and they're offering free online courses for all of the American history modules that they have to help people understand the true, in their words, perspective of history. But what I think is, on another note, what I was wanting to say is people who are atheists or who aren't very religious or spiritual at my work, who are left leaning and see everything that's going on, they are looking at all of conservative Christianity and saying, I don't read the Bible, but I know enough to know that you guys aren't following Jesus' teachings. Yeah. He was kind, caring, gentle, meek, thoughtful, patient, loving, and none of you are showing that. So it's insane to see, and I've had this talk because they asked me, because they know I have religious views, but they know that how I'm siding with things, because there's no way you can't talk about it when something like the Capitol happens. We're going to talk about that. There's nothing you can do, you know. And so they've asked me like, where do you stand? And I have to tell them there's hypocrisy everywhere, and they see it. No Christian even has to explain to them the hypocrisy, the fact that people aren't following the biblical understanding of things, and the insane direction that this conservative mindset took them to they're just not following the Bible. And people who don't even read the Bible know that people aren't even following the Bible. So I just there was a point that they connected to what you guys were talking about, but I think I lost it.
No, when I think about why people are atheists and why people have gone the directions they have, they can still be, it seems to me, they can still be God's people out there that have just been battered by some of us in condemning them in however we may have subtly done it. We had all these wrong ideas of God ourselves, and so people are very bittered against religion in general.
They are, but they know it's what's crazy is that it's the Christian the Christians of this nation who tried to push Jesus on everyone and look at how nice and loving and kind and whatever he was, and then turn around and act demonic almost.
Right, right.
So for someone outside of religion to look at that, it's insanity. I mean, you know what I mean? And so, but then they say, well, how come there are so few Christians? But there are Christians out there who get it, you know, and who understand that that's not at all what the Bible teaches. So I was able to have some good conversations with them and be like, yeah, no, this isn't that the Bible is wrong and it's all horrible. It's just that there's an insane amount of hypocrisy. And what the crazy thing is when you look at the Bible and you try to find only the parts that allow you to be violent, what you just became is a religious extremist. And this is what the accusation was for all the racism against Muslim people, saying that they're all terrorists. You know what I mean? So you just turned around and did the same thing you accused other people of doing. You're not even, you can't, it's mind boggling. And it's so deceptive. And I was trying to talk to my boss, but because of these websites, I mean, Satan is preparing the way for them to never get out of that mess. You have a Hillsdale College now trying to reteach them all their history without any bias and the true history. So when I try to come at them with our lines, with our information that is so, awesome, there's a wall there because now they have their own history. You know what I mean? It's just, it's overwhelming. I know we're going to be able to do a great work, but it's just insane to see how the two streams are operating and how it's
The Lord is preparing his people to hear his voice, and he's preparing us for the correct message to say.
We have to remember to look back to Joshua and Caleb and remember that God is leading.
He is, and it's going to be fine. But this is why Elder Tess said, if you guys remember a while back, she said the majority of the people coming in this movement are going to be from the liberal side.
Yeah.
Because the conservative side, I mean, it's so deep, the entrenchment into that and the conspiracy theories and the uninterest in looking at things logically, that it's just, it would take decades and decades to barely swing them around, which is time that God just, it's too late now. So, and it's sad because there's a lot of family and friends there. And it's really sad, but
It's sad. It is sad. Yeah, let's it work way over. So let's, if anybody else has anything to say, otherwise we'll close in prayer and go break for lunch.
Just don't give up hope because God's working.
Amen. Amen. Brother Trevor, did you want to say something?
What, can you put up your revolutions chart?
Certainly. The one that I had up just a minute ago?
Yeah.
Okay. That one?
Yes. Okay. In your own words, what is the revolution from 9/11 to November 9?
In my own words.
Like what is the revolution? Who is revolting against who, or how would you, I'm interested to hear because I can't really, I haven't found a way to really give a concise understanding of what that really is.
Overturning of a democracy into a dictatorship. That's the main point of it. But what was pointed out here was what 9/11 caused in bringing about the calling, and she referred to it as that being the Civil War, is the partisanship, where 9/11 divided the party lines, and so one side was vehemently one way and one side was vehemently another way, and that was the Civil War. That this partisan divide was greater here at 9/11 is what she's stating. Than in the article that she was quoting, the partisan divide was greater here at 9/11 because of 9/11 than the partisan divide was in Vietnam. So you had that partisan divide in Civil War is the two sides, the Republican or the North and the South, or the Republican and the Democrats fighting against each other, and that there's no bipartisan place to meet. And she says that that partisanship was the beginning of the Civil War. Did that help?
Well, I guess, but like, were the two sides not acting against each other before that as well?
Not to the extent as what they began to do at 9/11. And in studying, and if you're with us in the afternoon, after we come back from lunch, we're gonna continue to work on that document, Unfit for the Constitution document, and understanding through history the ideologies and the beliefs of the two different sides, and what's carried with them with this Republican side, which at the time was the South, is this nationalism and nativism, and how they read the Constitution. So one side sees that we need to bring that 9/11 was a judgment on the United States because we don't have God in our government, which was the argument that was during the Civil War, which was the argument in the 50s. And so in 9/11, they start bringing God back in, and that's the studies of In God We Trust. And you can go back to the Brazil classes, and she had 4 presentations where she did that, and then she's been updating that with the recent Germany camp meeting to understand it. So one side is reading and understanding the Constitution as we are a Christian nation, and we're being judged because we let all these atheists and all these secularists overrule our nation and permeate our nation and take God out of everything, and we're going to put God back in everything. 9/11, what she's saying is that 1989, that with the Soviet Union now no longer a superpower, that the United States has this dominance and this power, but they're not using that power. And 9/11 comes along, which creates this divide, staunch divide between the Republicans and the Democrats, and that's what she calls the Civil War, to lead us eventually to the Sunday Law, where they're no longer protecting the rights of minorities, and they're standing for religious freedom and their understanding of religious freedom. So the Civil War begins with that bipartisanship divide between the Republicans and the Democrats.
Okay. And now the counter-revolution, would you describe that?
The counter-revolution, according to the other, and you'd have to go back to watch, we plan on, I think we've been kind of talking about it, maybe going back and reviewing those revolution studies. I've talked about it a few times, that we might represent those ones. But the studies of the German, Russian, and French Revolution, they brought us to understand the second application of the French Revolution, and then the American Revolution, that showed us this counter-revolution. So this period here is to take this democracy and progressively overturn it to a new government, a new system of government, a dictatorship. There's a period where each of these revolution studies shows us a period of quiet in between, and then a counter-revolution begins. And the counter-revolution is to try to overdo what just got set up. But what these lines of revolution show us is that this counter-revolution, which is their attempt to overturn and get rid of what just happened, it fails. And it proceeds to be the dictatorship that it will be at Panium and Sunday Law.
Oh, and then that's why you were saying that those other studies were showing more steps to dictatorship in the future.
Right. So when you had George Floyd, the murder, I'm going to use it that way, the murder of George Floyd and the murder of many Black men and women by white police officers, the whole world is polarized to look at the systemic racism that is taking place, the trampling on a specific people, but it also addresses sexism, and then eventually homophobia, because when you go back through the histories, they came in that order: slavery, women's rights, and then the persecutions against homosexuals. So what has been being addressed in the movement is nationalism, because it's more than race. It's nationalism because it's different in every country. So it's not just about racism in America, it's about nationalism. And then sexism, and then homophobia. So the shot heard around the world polarized the attention to these atrocities that are taking place, and the cry went out louder than ever before, at least from the way I understand it, of systemic racism. But then when you come to January 6th, and more of the news comes out showing that systemic racism exists, because you have the Capitol Police that are letting people in. You have the Capitol Police, an officer taking a selfie with one of these guys. You have reports and stories of some of the lawmakers that brought some of these people in advance and showed them around and gave them a tour and showed them where these offices are. So that's why I was saying that what I've been kind of coming to understand it as is these, if you're hired for a job, and I went back to Daniel again, if you're hired for a job, you do the job you're hired to do, you do the job description, but these people are doing their jobs according to their ideology and their goals, and to overthrow and rule and keep Donald Trump in office. But there's multiple things, somebody had brought that up too, there's multiple issues, like the Boogaloo, is that how you say it, Boogaloo? That they are not actually pro-Trump, if I remember right. I didn't read that article, but I think they're the ones that are not pro-Trump. They are anti-government, period. And so that whole line exists as well. So anyways, this counter-revolution was to try to undo what just got established in this dictatorship. But we know from the lines that the counter-revolution fails, and we proceed to the Sunday law in a full-blown change of transition, trains of one kingdom to another.
Okay, thank you.
I hope I did that justice. I think that was all correct. Anybody correct me if I was wrong in anywhere.
That was a beautiful explanation.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand it well myself. So let's have a closing prayer. And Brother Troy, would you like to close us in prayer?
My background is noisy.
Oh, we can have somebody else if they want. Brother Jonathan?
Sure, if my internet holds up here. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for the wonderful blessing of coming together and being able to participate in these studies, Lord. We're very thankful for the opportunity to review these lines, Lord. It seems more now than before that they become more and more understandable as we reflect on them, Lord, and we look back on many of the things that that have led up and proved these things to be true. We thank you, Lord, for your patience, and we recognize the great need for us to understand these lines, Lord, as they will be our weapons to help us to bring this understanding to people who are caught up in the mix and who have been drinking the wine of Babylon. So, Lord, I pray that each one of us here would receive a continued edification from these messages and a better understanding. And Lord, that each time we come together, we'll be strengthened by our fellowship and our shared understandings, Lord. We thank you for this. We ask that you bless the food for each person here who's going to go for lunch, and Lord willing, we'll all return and continue on this afternoon. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.